So Brian, first of all, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Now, you're the founder and CEO of Kairos, which is a facial recognition firm. You've also been recognized by the Wall Street Journal as one of the top startups. Now, with that in mind, what do you feel is the value proposition that Kairos brings to your clients?
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity. Really, really good to be here. For us, we're solving a problem of what's going on right now. So our name, Kairos, it's Greek it means the most opportune moment. And so what we do for our customers is we help them make the most of this time, right now, this second. And with facial recognition, help you understand what your customers want out of your products right now, the decision-making patterns, helping identify employees. So is it really the employee that should be clocking in at this time? We help learning management companies, online learning companies, make sure the person taking the test online is the person enrolled for the class.
Right.
So just helping people make the most of this time.
Okay, so have you ran any kind of numbers to see how does that really benefit your client base?
Absolutely, big time, big time. So we consider ourselves like a biometric, like
right.
Just like fingerprints or iris scans, things of that nature. But we're eminently more usable because the face, everyone has one, we all know what each other look like, right? And so one of our customers, an oil and gas manufacturer in Texas, they have 4,000 employees. We save them $4.33 per employee per day by making sure the person clocking in is the right person. We charge them $3 per employee per month, so it's a huge return on investment. Fully rolled out, they'll save $14.2 million a year by using our service.
You would say that it is more for a large-scale enterprise business?
Right now, yeah, we're a medium and large business, but in the coming months, the six to 8 months, we'll have a small business product as well. So really opening up to the world in multiple languages too, in multiple geographies.
Okay. Now I'm curious as to why you think that the facial recognition as a business is a viable and sustainable model going forward.
Yeah, so we believe that our face and recognition, humans have been doing it for millennia, for all time, right? It's kind of woven into the fabric of our society. So, because something the computers could not do very well only a few years ago. So now that we can add that ability to all these services, all these phones, all these cameras that are all around our life, we think that the opportunity is just huge.
Well, clearly your investors think so, or else they wouldn't be partnering with you. You mentioned a term I've heard you use, and I'm curious, the buddy punching. Tell us what that means.
Buddy punching, very common, unfortunately. So for an hourly employee, it's when you call ahead to your buddy and you say, hey, I'm running late, could you punch me in? Or you have them punch you out after your shift is over. So you may leave at 5, but they punch you out at 5:15. So there's about $120 billion a year is lost to that,
wow.
to buddy punching, worldwide.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. So I was just curious as to what exactly that means, but I know the process very well.
I'm sure you never did that.
No, absolutely not, absolutely. But I've heard of others who've done it, so that's why I wanted to know about it. But and speaking of your investors, how did you go about getting them on board, and what was that process like?
Oh, it's a tough process. So, one, we went through this accelerator called the New Me Accelerator, which taught us how to pitch to investors, how to create investor decks, how to really speak the language of investment. And then with that knowledge, we started pitching for our first round, which was $500,000. That was 5 folks here in Miami. We're based here in Miami, Florida. And that was great. And then we used that money, we created this really a minimum version of the company, and now we're growing and scaling. So that next pitch, we now have about 80 or so investors, all to the tune of $10,000, $20,000 each. So we've raised now, as of February 5th, $1.2 million for the company. And that process involves multiple pitches, multiple investment decks, lots of financial conversations.
Right. I know that's a lot of work involved in that. You talked about New Me, and this is run by Angela Benton, correct, that we both know, great person. And you're also currently based at the Lab Miami. How instrumental have both those experiences been in terms of being a part of the relationship with New Me and Lab Miami, not just for Kairos, but for you personally?
Oh, man, absolutely. So I'll say about New Me in Kairos, I always tell people we went into New Me going 40 miles an hour, and we left going 400 miles an hour. So it's just a period of absolute transformation for us. And the Lab Miami is actually very similar. People here help each other. They're very collaborative. Businesses that are in the lab are just better businesses. But to the other half of your question, the personal side, it's the personal relationships that really make both of them work very, very well. I consider Angela a good friend. She is absolutely an amazing person who is really like a mentor to me. And really a living embodiment of hard work, tenacity. Her life isn't the easiest story. She has 3 children, moved to San Francisco by herself, and really made a great life of it. And it's inspiring for myself and for our employees.
You mentioned mentoring, and I was going to touch on this a little bit later, but you mentioned Angela being a mentor to you. How important do you feel that mentoring is in the process? And outside of Angela, are there any other mentors that you can tell us what that relationship was like?
Absolutely. So I have mentors and I do mentor others. I think it's really important amongst any group really, but particularly amongst entrepreneurs to mentor each other. It's a very, very hard thing. Raising money, running a business, the emotional ups and downs are very difficult, and sometimes you feel like you're going through it alone, but in reality, a lot of folks are going through it as well. So being able to talk about that, the emotional side of it, I think is very important. I don't think we do enough of that in our communities. As far as me, Angela Benton's certainly a big mentor. Some of our investors are really great mentors. We have some investors like Juan Pablo Capella, who runs a law firm here in the city. Just amazing folks who have built companies, $600, $700, $800 million companies. Also a mentor that I never actually met, but I worked for was Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
I worked at Apple for a couple of years, and it was through a period of just immense growth. Kind of after the iPhone was launched, but all the way through the iPad launch, so just a period of 800% growth kind of thing. And I learned more about kind of CEOism by the way he just really massively orchestrated that company. There's no words for it, really.
You mentioned that not only do you have mentors, but you mentor as well. Could you tell us a little bit about your mentoring?
Absolutely. So I do a few things. I'm mentoring about 10 entrepreneurs currently, all at different stages, and different groups.
Okay.
Women, men, minorities, you name it. So it's a very diverse group of folks that I think are doing really great things here in Miami and across the world, actually. But beyond that, I do a lot of speaking engagements. I'm speaking this Saturday to a group of African American youth here in the city. They're coming by to talk about entrepreneurship. We're really just trying to show people,
nice.
This is I got terrible grades as a kid, let me tell you, D's and F's, that kind of thing. But I was somehow able to get as far as we got. Right. And so it's just kind of sharing those stories and showing I'm a real person. You can do it. You're just as smart or smarter than me. It's just a matter of applying yourself and knowing what's available. Oh,
that's really huge. I want to come back to some aspects of that a little bit later. But you've worked at IBM and you've worked at Apple.
I have.
Now, were those experiences a direct link to Kairos, or did it come as a roundabout way? And how have those experiences helped you with where you are now?
Another really good question. So IBM and Apple are like black and white, night and day.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're as different as two organizations can be, yet they're both very successful. So I took really the best pieces of both those experiences, kind of the structure of IBM and the power of working in very specific verticals versus the kind of fluidity of Apple, right? And just taking both those concepts, and we've woven those ideas into Kairos. Really is the best of both worlds.
Okay, that's great. That's good because there's no either or in this part. As a young entrepreneur and CEO, what were your challenges starting out, and how did you respond to them?
Wow, fundraising is definitely a challenge at any level. You have to make sure that you, one, treat the investor money like your own money, like your family's money, and make sure you really hit the milestone and goals that you set out for yourself. And so sometimes you push, you spend too many hours in a day, 22, 23 hours awake in a day, and ultimately your body just cannot handle that kind of load on a consistent basis. And so one of the things I've learned is to be very effective in my time, but do take a couple hours off and unplug and relax and lower the shoulders, because if I'm not well, I can't perform.
Yeah. So what is it then that I know you're talking about, the fundraising, that is some of the challenges and hard work that goes into it. But what is it now currently that really keeps you up late?
Wow, what keeps me up late? The next fundraise. So we are aiming for the fences. We're going to be in 15 or so countries this year, but we want to do it. We want to raise a $200 million round, and we intend on being 50, 60 countries. We want to become an Endeavor company, which is an organization that helps explode companies. And that process is going well so far. So we're looking at just explosive growth, a couple thousand employees, 3 or 4 years from now, mostly based here in Miami, and just really changing the game.
That's beautiful. Let's talk about how you actually, a couple of things, how you got into the technology space. Was it something that you had an interest in or wanted to do at a younger age, or was it just something that over time came to be? And how did you decide to become an entrepreneur and choose Kairos and its business model as something to do?
Yeah, so I've been using computers since I was 8 years old. My father brought home a computer when we were very young, at a time where very few folks had computers in their house. I'm 35 years old now, so you can imagine, this is 25 years ago or so. And amongst African Americans, it was even more unlikely to have a computer in your home. So my father was kind of very forward-thinking in that area. He was an engineer, did a lot of computers at work, and he saw the value. I think my mom probably thought, what are you doing with this thing? Why are you paying all this money for this thing? But in the end, it became second nature to me. I understand computers fundamentally now because it was just part of my kind of core language, kind of core to who I am. So it's always been part of my life.
This is a conversation I've had with people like yourself who have been, jumping into the technology space and really using it to expand. And quite often that they've had some kind of background that has been, technologically related. Is that really a precursor to really, being successful in the space?
I don't think it is. I think that there are creative people who have the big idea and see the need, and they're maybe business folks. And then there's also the technical side, right? If you can mold both those into one person, great. But sometimes you can't. And so if you're a creative person, find the technical co-founder. If you're a technical person, find the creative co-founder to kind of, bring those two genres together. But both models work.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you still have to build a team regardless.
Yeah.
The technological scene, is really jumping off in South Florida and in Miami in particular. I just want to get your take on what's happening here, and where do you see the African Americans positioning ourselves in it?
No, it's an amazing, I can't say it enough, amazing South Florida tech infrastructure. So the space we're here in the lab, right? About 14 months ago, they were in a 700 square foot space. They had 8 members. Now 14 months later, they're now in a 10,000 square foot space, being forced to expand. It's completely full, 140 members. And that represents nearly the same number of companies. So it's just an absolutely dynamic and growing space. Our largest tech meetup has almost 9,000 members, and their average attendance is between 500 and 900 people per event. So Miami is the biggest kept secret, I think, maybe in the world as far as tech.
Now, you have been here for a while and been relatively successful. How can African Americans position themselves here in South Florida and Miami in this technological scene, this ecosystem that's really growing rapidly, and really take advantage of what's happening here?
So what I find, interestingly enough, is Miami is a city of immigrants and a city of really kind of minorities, essentially. 65% of Miamians were born somewhere else. So the great thing about if you're from a group like African Americans, or I even use the term Black Americans, because you can be, Black Cuban, or you can be Black Dominican, or what have you. So if you're Black American, you can come to a place like Miami, and we're all starting off at the exact same level. And there are these kind of institutional issues that kind of hold folks back. I think it's a very wide open lens. And when you look at the folks that have kind of the pillars of money or industry or things of that nature, they're usually minorities of some sort, whether they be Hispanic Americans or African Americans or you name it. So I think that the opportunities for minorities in general in Miami are just amazingly strong.
Do you find that it's more advantageous here as opposed to Silicon Valley or in Europe because it's so new, and do you think we're still playing catch up, not just in South Florida, but countrywide?
Countrywide, I think we could certainly say we're playing catch up. I think though in the tech field specifically, it's a little different. I like to believe it's a little more merit based, though it's not ideal yet. But if you could show investors, this is my plan, this is how much money we made this year, last year, this is where we're going to, ultimately the money will decide the investment that you get. Sometimes though, you don't get the chance to make that pitch because you're not in that room, you're not in that group, and that's where we need to do some more work with the networking, the mentorship, making sure people get a chance to tell their story to the right person. But if they do, they can probably get the money.
I know we talked about the fundraising, which it takes up a lot of time. But I'm curious sitting here talking to you and running such a company such as Kairos and it being what it is. What's a day like in terms of running this operation, this facial recognition business?
Yeah, whether I like it or not, it's a 17-hour, 18-hour day. I've peeled that back to that number. I'd like to get it down to 15. That's the goal for 2014. I start my day focused and talking to the folks in Europe, usually, either investors or customers or employees that are based there. And then and that starts around 5 a.m. And as the day moves on, as New York wakes up, as Chicago wakes up, as the West Coast, I work with the folks that are in those geographies. We have customers as far east as like Sweden, Norway, for a number of customers in Paris, France, and as far west as Thailand, Singapore, Australia. So for us, the days are long, but they're enjoyable.
So you have folks globally working on this?
Correct. Either workers, customers, vendors, you name it. Yeah, there's someone in almost at least 40 countries we've talked to.
How long have you been in operation?
A little less than 2 years, like right around 2 years.
So it's been a pretty rapid growth.
It's been a heck of a 2 years.
That's a good thing. What is your entryway into your customer base primarily?
There's a number. We do a lot of. We seem to get a lot of media. We seem to get a lot of attention like this, and that kind of puts us out there on some different stages. You mentioned earlier we were one of the Wall Street Journal's top 25 startups in the country, and so that press, that's a 13-week event. It wasn't just one article. So all that press, all that data, all those videos really helped to cement a lot of interest from the investors and from customers.
Okay, that's great. What is it that keeps you fresh and excited each day when you wake up that is not Kairos related?
Well, family. I have a daughter. I love my parents dearly. It's a family. Friends. And then really, Kairos is that's
That's about it. Kairos creeps back in somewhere in there, right?
Exactly.
Now, Brian, as we wrap up, and we really appreciate it, tell us the honest truth. What came first, sunny Miami or Kairos?
Wow. Okay. Well, I lived in Miami before I started Kairos.
Okay.
So I came to Miami first, but I do believe that Miami is going to feed the growth engine that is Kairos through its internationalism. And one of the things I often say is, we don't just want to have a Spanish language website, for instance. We understand that Cuban Spanish and Colombian Spanish and Puerto Rican Spanish and Mexican Spanish are all different dialects of
Absolutely.
Spanish. So we want websites that speak to those dialects. We may say dale on the Cuban website, but we may say adios on the Mexican website. Just the different ways of speaking. So Miami can feed all those things. We have developers and support staff that are from every country in Latin America and Europe. So it's a great place to start a company.
What's next? What's next for you?
What's next for me? Immediately, we'll grow this company into, within the next 24 months from now, we'll be making around $30–35 million annually. We'll be raising, again, the $200 million I spoke about, and we'll be focused on growing our organization, both here and hubs around the world. I've been doing a lot of travel, and I look forward to it.
Brian, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming down.